Hi there, my name's David Donahue from the Eyes of Horus. And today what I'd like to do in helping you to learn how to overcome your anxiety, whether you're the person who has the anxiety, whether you're a person who is like a therapist or a coach who's helping people to overcome anxiety, or you just know someone who's got it, friend, colleague, family member. Today is about really helping you understand a bit more about anxiety and how it can in one way be simple, but in another way it can be very, very complex. And so as part of this, I want to start doing a case study to understand and explore the ideas of anxiety and how you can overcome it. So I'm going to start with a person by the name of Gary. Now that's not his real name because of confidentiality, but we'll just call him Gary for this time. And he wanted to be free of his anxiety. That's what most people say. What does that actually mean? You see, when you say you want to be free of your anxiety, anxiety itself has so many symptoms: mental, emotionally, physically, behavioral. And so with him, what he wanted to do was he wanted to really be free of the anxiety type symptoms that occurred when he was selling to some people. And his idea was that when he would go into sales, and he was a salesman and he was a successful salesman, then he found in his last job that there was anxiety, that it stopped him from really being able to promote the product. And the idea is his problem, which he called anxiety, we had to drill into. Now, I'm going to look at what his problems were in a few moments, because you begin to understand that as I go through this case study, that you can start to put yourself into a similar situation, understanding what was happening for him, because that may be what's happening for you at the same time. And so I worked with him on my program of overcoming anxiety, and in doing that, he was able to really come to terms with what were the symptoms. We were able to go in, find the triggers. We're able to go in and actually address the causes, and as a consequence, through my guidance, he was able to go in and actually make the changes so that then he was able to be free of his anxiety, which is what he was able to do and what he was wanting to do. The other piece was that when we looked at the idea of what was his struggle and what was his problem, you see, he was saying he had a problem being able to present to clients. And the idea was, well, hold on, you're a salesperson, you've been doing this for years. That just doesn't gel with what you're saying. So we drilled more into it. And as we did, what we learned was that it was the chatter, the chit-chat that he would have at the start. In other words, that initial socializing that he actually struggled with. And because he struggled with that initial chit-chat that would occur at the start before a presentation, then by the time he got to give his presentation, of course, he was all worked up. He had the heart pounding. He had the feeling of sweating. He had the idea of his voice was going and fluttering all over the place. And of course, that's what he became aware of, thinking that that was a problem. In actual fact, the struggle that he actually had was before he even presented. And so what we had to do is we had to unpack all this in a way that helped him to understand. And I suppose if you have anxiety, or you're working with your clients who have anxiety, or even a friend or a colleague who has anxiety, what you want to do is to unpack it. And what I mean by that is start to ask questions. You see, what a person will often say is the problem or the cause of anxiety very, very, very rarely is the cause of anxiety. And so as with this person, it wasn't so much about presenting, because in actual fact, he knew how to present. It was more about the socializing and the networking at the very start. So by going into that and clearing the problems he had around the idea of the small talk and helping to teach him through the sessions on how to be able to create that small talk so that then he could be comfortable, confident, and move into his sales presentations, it made a big difference. It made such a difference that he was actually swapping jobs. And in this new one, it meant that there was a get-together before he even started. And so he went to that get-together and he was okay. He was able to do what he needed to do to socialize. That problem he'd had before had gone. And so part of what it was about was he knew that he had some symptoms, but he also decided, you know what, I can't help it. I can't fix myself. And I'm not prepared to just keep running away. And so as a consequence, that's what changed, was he said, it's time, I need to do something about that. Now, I know what that feeling was like when I had my claustrophobia. When I was not able to achieve my dream, it was time to get it resolved. Luckily, in his case, it didn't take him the 10 years that it took me. In actual fact, with him, it only took 3 or 4 sessions to be able to go through and really get in touch with what he needed to get in touch with to resolve it, to solve it, as I say, being able to find the cause, the triggers, and then fill the gap, which is learning that new way of being able to socialize. Now, you might think that that's fairly easy and simple to do. Well, yes, it is when you know how. And that's the thing with anxiety, is people may have had it for years. Does not mean it's going to take years to resolve. In actual fact, it can take as little as 3-4 sessions. I usually find it takes about 6 to 8 sessions, and the reason is because sometimes it's about learning how to cope. And once we learn to cope, we feel safer. When you feel safer, you're then ready to go and address and start to go to the triggers and the cause and start to ask the questions so that you can then say, what is the problem? What is it you're needing? And help your mind that creates those symptoms to recognize how to satisfy your need. And of course, the other thing that often happens, as in this case, was when we develop a level of anxiousness in the symptoms that we present, then we stop learning. And so once the anxiety is cleared, you then really need to start learning more about what it is that you have stopped learning. In his case, it was how to have chit-chat, how to do some social networking. In your case, it could be around presenting. It could be around socializing. It could be around dealing with situations in the family where it feels difficult. People don't always agree. And you could learn how to do that. So there is always 2 sides. And so one of the things I want you to think about is, Gary is now happy. And the question is, what needs to happen for you to be happy? What needs to happen for you to get over your anxiety? Or what needs to happen for you to approach that person who has anxiety? Because often the idea is it's about simply asking questions. So it's not about the myths that I covered in a previous series. It's really about the idea of starting to ask questions, to understand, and starting to resolve and to bring up whatever needs to be resolved. So part of it is, when are you going to be ready to be happy? When are you going to be ready? And you might say, yeah, I've been doing everything I can to address the anxiety. Well, if it's still there, it's still stuff to be addressed. It's still stuff to resolve. And to do that, you need to be able to make sure you find a person who can overcome anxiety. You see, when people come and see me and say, can I overcome anxiety? I say, yes, absolutely you can. And I know how to do it, and I've got proof from other clients. So if you want to get over your anxiety, then find someone who you can ask and say, can I overcome my anxiety? And notice if they say yes, great, go to them. If they say no, find someone else, because it's not that type of person that you need. So hopefully this case study's helped you to start to understand a bit more about yourself, about anxiety, and it's about asking questions to really get into understanding what's happening, and then you can actually satisfy whatever the need is that the unconscious mind has been trying to get to. So it's time for me to go off to another client now, so I'll talk to you later on in another video about overcoming your anxiety. So it's David Donahue from the Eyes of Horus, and I'll chat with you later.